Story 1. My buddy can disassemble a PlayStation 5 controller and put it back together blindfolded. But he once tried to pay for a coffee with his library card. Story 2. Cliché, but definitely my dad. The man knows about everything and in his day was a master before his time. He built computers before they were a thing. Our basement when I was a kid looked like a mad scientist's lab where he built lasers, microwave, guns, lie detector tests, and computers. He knew 12 computer programming languages. He was a master of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, plumbing, electrical work, and carpentry. He still does all the taxes for our family business. He wrote programs like Skype before they existed so he could talk with his family back home. The software we still use for payroll and accounting was all handwritten, which is amusing when we get audited. He can recite every formula in chemistry from memory and knows an extensive amount about physics. He could have been a billionaire, but his father died when he was 25 and he had to take over the family business as it failed without him. It consumed all his efforts. He is selfless, remarkable, and truly impressive. Story 3. My grandfather left school at 15 to work as a carpenter, but he always had a clear grasp of current events and loved literature. He often grabbed a dictionary to look up an unfamiliar word, then became absorbed and read the entire page. Story 4. My husband is intellectually brilliant and emotionally intelligent, a rare combination. Story 5. My great-grandmother could conjugate Latin verbs, calculate the exact amount to the penny when checking out at the store, and was great at algebra. She made it through college in 3 years in the 1920s with a double major. After working as an office clerk and despite having a young widowed mixed-race mother and no inheritance, she was a horrible cook and a great historical storyteller. Story 6. One of my sister's friends at college was very impressive. She was studying psychology and as part of the course had to administer an intelligence quotient test to see how they worked. She used a friend as her subject and administered the test extremely carefully, following all best practice guidelines. He scored 189. Of course, intelligence quotient tests are limited. You cannot use a regular test on someone of exceptional ability because there are special tests for the top few percent. Even so, wow. He did not bother getting a doctor of philosophy and went straight into research. He had his first paper in Nature at age 26, I think, and was academic research director at a large United States medical school for many years. He is also very charming and modest. Annoyingly. Story 7. I am not sure of the exact details, maybe he graduated early or something, but back in college there was a high school senior in my Calculus 3 class. A few minutes into the first lecture, we noticed he was not taking any notes. The professor even asked if he needed a pen, and the student said he did not need to take notes. Everyone chuckled a bit. The professor shrugged, told him he really should, and then moved on. The thing is, he never did. He did not even bring a notebook. Somehow he earned 100% on every test and assignment. You could see him processing the information in real time. He would just sit there, slightly fidgeting, as if his brain were working overtime. Whenever the professor gave us a problem to solve, he would stare at the board for maybe 30 seconds, raise his hand, and give the correct answer. At first it was annoying, but then it became respect. I still think about that student sometimes and wonder where he ended up. Story 8. It was probably my uncle. He earned a Doctor of Philosophy in civil engineering. While learning Russian, and according to my dad, the Central Intelligence Agency tried to recruit him, he put himself through college by welding and bought his own house to live in while in college. He did not serve in the military and his family was poor. He held multiple professorships and received awards. He worked for Tracer and led a team that built an early prototype of the Army-Navy ALE-29 electronic countermeasures device for military aircraft. In the late 1960s, he bought a small used car dealership. He sold most of the dealership but kept a small Honda franchise that had been a minor part of the business. When the oil embargo hit in 1973, he stayed up all night thinking about it. The next day, he went to the bank and borrowed every cent he could, then bought as many motorcycles as possible. Before long, he was the only motorcycle dealer in the state of Texas and one of the few in the country that still had inventory. Dealers from across the country called him, but he only sold at full retail. He retired shortly afterward at about 45 years old. It did not hurt that while he worked for Tracer, he married one of the richest women in Central Texas, but the marriage did not last long. It kind of shocked me when he said he thought all recreational drugs should be legalized. He was not a user. It seemed like a libertarian view of the world. When I was about 10 years old, he took me to lunch and told me about the book The Naked Ape by Desmond Morris. Even in retirement, he always wore blue jeans and a blue work shirt with his name embroidered above the pocket. In retirement, he had his own page on a local gym website and began building websites and doing database management for his old schools and friends. Story 9. A colleague I work with is the kindest, humblest, and most intelligent person I have ever met. I used to fall asleep watching nature documentaries, and occasionally I would ask him questions such as what thermosynthesis is and where on earth it occurs. He would respond immediately with the correct answer. He scored 518 on the medical college admission test and wanted to retake it. I am confident that when it comes to medical school, he will have his pick of the litter. Story 10. My wife has a very high intelligence quotient and can solve almost any problem. Story 11. My former boss was incredibly smart and able to think outside the box to solve seemingly unsolvable problems. She was a national treasure. Story 12. She was my dad's former boss. I interacted with her as an adult only once, but she was sharp as a tack. I'm pretty quick-witted, but she was a paragraph ahead of everyone in conversation. I don't know how to explain it. It was ordinary small talk, but her responses were perfectly on point in a way I haven't heard from others. She was the head of human resources at a university before she was pushed out due to politics and had a breakdown. I don't know what she has done since that happened about 20 years ago, but an organization loses someone that smart. Story 13. Tough question. I have met a few people who blew my mind, but everyone is smart in different ways. Story 14. I have been fortunate to know many intellectuals in the sciences and the humanities who are adept at critical thinking and who change their views when presented with new information. Those are the primary criteria for intellect in my view. Story 15. I've known 2 MacArthur Fellows. I worked with each in academic research settings where there were many smart people and difficult problems to solve. Each stood out as exceptional even in that context. One worked in electrical engineering and computer science and received the fellowship for signal processing. The other was an anthropologist who studied cognition and linguistics. They were brilliant in very different ways, but both had an incredible ability to absorb a great deal of information and to frame or analyze it in simple, clarifying terms. Everything was like a riddle for them, and they always knew the trick to solve it. Being around them was remarkable. Every complicated problem suddenly seemed self-evident. Story 16. I was working with an 11-year-old boy in therapy. My intelligence quotient was 136, and he was much more capable than I was. Story 17. I have met quite a few. They all had one thing in common. They were fully articulate in communicating their intended message. Story 18. It depends. Do you mean someone who can solve any math problem or write a novel effortlessly? Or someone who, regardless of area of expertise, can pick up new skills with ease? If you mean the former, I went to middle and high school with a student named Albert who lived up to his name's stereotypical nerdiness. He was taking college-level math courses in early middle school, maybe even earlier. He graduated college in 3 years from possibly the best school in the world for his field and earned a Doctor of Philosophy there. From my memory, it has been at least 15 years since I saw him, but he did well in most other classes as well. Story 19. I've met many people in different areas. I'm privileged in this aspect of life. Story 20. I never met him, but I have read all of Cormac McCarthy's novels. He was a great writer, clearly well-read, and he was also highly knowledgeable in physics and mathematics. Story 21. Currently, my roommate is a total whiz who has created multiple constructed languages for our tabletop role-playing setting, has authored several books, and can teach anyone physics. Historically, it was my birth father. When I finally met him, I could see the intelligence he once had and that I had heard so much about. He retained some of it, but drug use had damaged many of his abilities. Story 22. I was an administrator for a few Harvard Medical School professors. When I tell you they were the smartest but also the most foolish people I have ever experienced, I am not lying. Story 23. Two lead engineers I worked with at Hewlett-Packard were so much more brilliant than the rest of us. We would get drinks and try to come to terms with what this meant for our own relative IQ. One of my best friends is like a brother. I met him when he was just starting college. I surfed and partied with him as he breezed through medical school, ruining everyone else's bell curve. It turns out there really is such a thing as photographic memory. Story 24. I took a class from Douglas Hofstadter once. He speaks about a dozen languages, conducted serious academic research in 4 or 5 distinct disciplines, and won a Pulitzer Prize. So it was probably him. Story 25. A friend who never finished school but could outthink anyone in a debate. Story 26. My grandfather taught himself 3 languages, left college early for law school so he could get his degree before he enlisted in World War II, had the Bible almost memorized, and did many other things. I miss him every day. Story 27. I know a man who is at the bleeding edge of theoretical physics in at least 2 fields of study. He is now one of the leading minds in the race to build the first quantum computer. He is very nice, humble, personable, and happy to talk with people about anything. His whole family is gifted. They are also good-looking and athletic. In my field, I work with some shockingly smart people, but this man is leagues beyond anyone else I have ever met. Story 28. My grandpa was a soldier for South Vietnam during the war. He was sent to a communist re-education camp and received refugee status in the United States when he was released. He spoke French, English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Khmer, and several Chinese dialects. He was an excellent artist and a teacher. He drank 2 to 3 beers and smoked a pack of cigarettes every day. He quit smoking for a week, which was the same week he died. Story 29. My dad was brilliant in many ways. He built supercomputers in the 1960s, held 2 master's degrees, was a chess grandmaster, could calculate numbers in his head extremely quickly, and invented many unusual and useful things that people still use today. He was also an elite swimmer, but he was also an alcoholic and a hippie, regularly used psychedelics, and lived in Ibiza in a cave as a hermit for years. He survived by eating squid, sold squid in exchange for wine, and worked as a farmer. He did not want to follow society's rules, and we lived deep in the forest. He was also very emotionally abusive toward my mother and me. He was the smartest and dumbest person I ever met, very much like the character in the movie A Beautiful Mind. He died from Alzheimer's disease. Story 30. I once knew a man who was studying quantum field theory at 18 years old. He was probably the most intelligent person I have ever met. Story 31. My grandfather was awarded the National Medal of Technology and Innovation. He was a titan of computer science and the father of the disk drive. He also liked to fly kites. Story 32. My wife has a Doctor of Philosophy in Biomedical Engineering and a Juris Doctor degree. She works at a law firm in Silicon Valley. Story 33. Weird Al Yankovic. I know that probably sounds ridiculous, but I used to work in radio and worked with many celebrities. I think I spent 48 cumulative hours with him. Story 34. My youngest sister is a genius, extremely creative, knows about everything, and always solves problems in ways no one else seems to think of. Story 35. My teacher in flight technology and flight safety is extremely knowledgeable and intelligent. He is not afraid to admit when he does not know something, and he understands the connections in the industry and in all areas of management so deeply that I doubt there is anything he cannot understand. Story 36. The 4 smartest people I know. 1. She is a nursing supervisor at a hospital. She started as a certified nursing assistant, then became a registered nurse, and later a supervisor. 2. He has a college degree. He enlisted in the military after September 11, 2001, and served in a special operations unit. He has documentation to confirm his service. 3. He works a desk job in local government. He is highly intelligent but does not want the stress of a position that would fully utilize his abilities. 4. She works as a nurse. She is capable of doing more but does not want the stress of a higher level position while raising her family. Story 37. A professor I met who could explain quantum mechanics and jokes from The Simpsons with the same level of passion. Story 38. My professor double majored in mathematics and physics, holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree in nuclear physics, and is also a fiction author. I have to give him credit. Story 39. Richard Henderson. At the time, I was unaware of exactly how brilliant he was. Story 40. Hard to say, but I've met people who are smart in completely different ways. Story 41. My dad was in Mensa, so it was him, but when I was a baby, it might have been Stephen Fry. Story 42. A friend named James, who holds a master's degree in physics, is very smart and witty. Story 43. My father was a child prodigy. He skipped so many grades in elementary school that a special car and driver took him to high school when he was still a little kid. When I was young and Trivial Pursuit was popular, it was always him against 6 other couples, and he always won. I am sure there are smarter people out there, but I have never met them. Story 44. There was a boy named John. I was a couple of years older than him, and we were in a study hall that combined all grades. When I saw a bottle that was clearly not Pepsi on his desk, I asked what it was. He said it was biofuel he had made over the weekend for a science project, and he described it as if it were as easy as making toast. Maybe his process was simple, but that moment still amazes me, and it was over 15 years ago. The last I heard, he was working in the medical field, which did not surprise me at all. Story 45. My mom was incredibly intelligent. She had a photographic memory and could remember books nearly line for line. She was one of the kindest, smartest, and hardest working people I ever had the pleasure of knowing. Story 46. He is the child of 2 United Nations diplomats. He learned Hangul in a day, whereas it took most linguistically inclined students a week to gain a solid grasp of it. Story 47. He is a high school mathematics and physics teacher and an old schoolmate of my father. He was offered a well-paid, renowned position as a researcher, but I believe he turned it down to remain in our town with his wife and children. He is the smartest man I have met, but he is a poor teacher. Story 48. The interesting thing is that you need a certain degree of intelligence to accurately assess another person's intelligence. Most people cannot recognize true intelligence. It seems nonsensical to them. What they are actually recognizing is someone who is a few steps ahead of them in an area they respect or covet. Story 49. A friend I went to high school with scored a perfect score on the Scholastic Assessment Test, worked on the design team for Apple's original iPhone, and has designed and built his own mountain bikes and electric guitars. He still manages not to come across as arrogant in person, although his Facebook posts can be a bit cerebral. I still see him regularly, more than 25 years after we graduated. Story 50. My daughter must get it from her mama. I love my munchkin. Story 51. My grandfather passed in 2021. He went to Lehigh University and was an engineer. He helped build hospitals and bridges throughout New York City during his career. He developed the plans for the addition my parents put on my childhood home, too. Whenever I struggled with math in school, which was often, I would go to him. My father was also very smart, but my grandfather was a full-on genius. However, he did not have common sense. When I was 4, he asked me to hold a piece of wood while he used power tools. My mother saw this and thought he was going to cut off my fingers, so she came running out of the house. Story 52. Intelligence. Knowledge, wisdom, experience, smarts, raw intelligence quotient and mental capacity. Correspondingly, I believe someone can be very smart but unintelligent. This is quite common, that is, wasted minds. Similarly, though rarer, I occasionally encounter someone who is not that smart but is quite intelligent, that is, with a great deal of accrued domain knowledge. Story 53. Colin Wells is a university dean and the author of the Penguin Press book, The Roman Empire. Story 54. He was a pre-medical student who chose to drop out and teach at a school for underprivileged children. I am not sure why he did it, but he is the smartest person I know. Story 55. My brother never underlined anything in his books, so we thought he didn't read them. But ask him anything, and he knew exactly where it was in the book, even the commas. Story 56. My husband is an aerospace engineer, but his talents and knowledge extend far beyond his field. Story 57. Jensen Huang is the co-founder and chief executive officer of NVIDIA. He knew 30 years ago that single-threaded computing using traditional central processing units would be supplanted by dense, parallel compute accelerators called graphics processing units. He also had the drive and determination to stick to that idea when everyone told him he was wrong. Story 58. I feel like my high school physics teacher is the answer. He is a true Renaissance man, a jack of all trades, with master's degrees in biology and creative writing. Story 59. Do you know Frankie, who works at the sandwich shop? He knows a lot of things. Story 60. The vice president of a company I used to work for graduated high school at 15. He earned a bachelor's degree in engineering. He decided to take the medical college admission test and scored a perfect score. The testing agency suspected he was cheating, so he retook the test and scored another perfect score. He went pre-med and attended medical school, but found it boring and decided to pursue law instead. He graduated at the top of his class from Duke Law, took the law school admission test and the bar exam, passed them, and then decided he did not want to practice law. He began doing programming work for companies to improve products. He has a degree in engineering, perfect scores on the medical college admission test and the law school admission test, is a certified attorney, and currently does programming and development work for a manufacturing company. Story 61. My cat convinces 5 people to feed her twice. Story 62. I am not sure, but I can list plenty of people who think they are the most intelligent person I have ever met. Story 63. My brother is a university professor and co-authored a textbook with another professor while pursuing his doctoral degree. He grasps ideas with ease and can explain concepts to people at any level. When personal issues arise, he is able to see both sides of an issue and gives thoughtful, helpful advice. Story 64. Through my job, I met an immigrant from British Guiana. We became good friends. He would call to discuss the state of the world, and I was always bowled over by his insights. Story 65. A French student in my master's program in machine learning had a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a doctorate in mathematics from Oxford. He was obviously very sharp and pleasant to talk with between lectures. Before the first semester, he had read every prerequisite and all the course readings, sometimes finishing those announced in introductory classes in 2 nights. He took minimal notes, corrected proofs shown on slides, and asked questions that made professors wonder what was going on. For coursework, he had usually already completed assignments or needed only minor revisions. For group projects, he would offer material he had written that reduced the remaining work to about 10 minutes. He graduated at the top of the class and then went to the United States to pursue a second doctorate. Story 66. I casually asked my husband one day to take an online Wonderlic test. He did not prepare at all. He paused his game and I handed him my laptop. He scored 48. I had always known he had a high intelligence quotient, but seeing him take the test and immediately return to his game without missing a beat was wild. Story 67. I will always be in awe of one of my chemistry professors, who is humble and introverted but remarkably intelligent across a wide range of topics, from birdsong to emotional intelligence to materials science and more. He and I had adjacent garden plots behind the school. He taught me every plant and what each needed from the soil. He is the faculty advisor for a queer student group that serves students who do not yet have a place where they fit in, and he finds ways to make everyone feel welcome. I aspire to his kind of intelligence. Humble, broad spectrum, and welcoming. Story 68. He was a professor of interdisciplinary studies at the University of California and an analyst for the Central Intelligence Agency. He thought through everything from all angles incredibly quickly, at the speed of conversation. Few people I have met possess that amount of raw processing power. Story 69. My Aunt Kathy is remarkable. I have traveled around the world and have many friends with doctoral degrees. Several are university professors. But there is just something about her. Story 70. My mother is one of the hands-down most intelligent people I know. She wanted to study engineering and enrolled at Purdue in the 1970s, completing her freshman year. However, my grandmother would not pay for further schooling and had her enroll in nursing school instead. Despite that, she was an excellent nurse. I wish she had the chance to finish what she wanted to study, but it did not work out. Even with advanced Alzheimer's, she is still sharp when we get her focused on something. At a dinner, she even said, "I'm a better speller than my child." And everyone's reaction was, "What in the world?" Story 71. My friend can solve a Rubik's Cube in 30 seconds, but once spent 10 minutes trying to figure out how to open a door labeled push. Story 72. Every time I look in the mirror, I see the most intelligent person I have ever met and the most attractive and accomplished lover. My only fault was that I used to be conceited, but now I am perfect. Sarcasm. Story 73. This hyper-intelligent convict I met in my first year in Oregon's prison system. I don't remember his name, but he was really a kid, probably 17 or 18, since everyone in the dorm was pretty much under 21. He was about 110 pounds soaking wet and never got off his bunk except for meals and the bathroom. He paid rent to stay on the main line. He had a thing where he would pull his eyebrows or hair out and eat it. He would have been odd anywhere, but especially in prison. He stuck out. He was not cut out for prison, but he was insanely smart, almost savant level. He had a mathematics degree from a university in Western Oregon that he received at 14 or 15, and he had an incredible knowledge base. He was very good at debating as well, not just arguing but classical debating. The kid had a calculating mind and had correspondences from different academic groups all over the world. He really stuck out to me. I don't know. I always watched him from afar because I was in my prison superstar phase and did not want to associate with someone in for dubious charges. But I always wondered how he ended up and where he is now. All that said, he was still in prison, so he was likely not the actual smartest person I've met. Just the one who stuck out the most. Story 74. My best friend is definitely there for me. What impresses me about her intellect is how masterful she is at boiling down tough concepts from her field, which is adjacent to chemistry and not my area, into conversation points I can engage with. When I ask her about her work, she does not spit out vocabulary terms. Instead, she gives a glimpse into the pragmatic applications and gradually zooms out to the bigger picture. I notice she takes this approach with other topics like politics. When she has a point to make, it is a targeted, impactful anecdote, not a regurgitation of headlines. I think it comes down to natural curiosity. She does not know everything and does not expect others to, but she values and engages with the process of learning. Story 75. To me, intelligence is not just solving mathematical or logical problems. It is the capacity for nuanced, critical thinking, the ability to listen and learn, to change your mind when new evidence makes sense, and, when appropriate, to persuade others to change theirs. It also means being open to lifelong learning. The two most intelligent people I know are friends of mine. One has a law degree from Stanford and the other never finished high school. I admire them both deeply because they embody what I described. Story 76. One of my best friends comes from a well-educated family. Both parents have degrees and work in fields that require academic ability, and they are highly successful. His mother worked her way up in a field where she had to be good at her job. He did not score a perfect score on the Scholastic Assessment Test, but he came close. He reads at least one book at a time and can easily finish one book a week. He can read around 500 words a minute. I have seen him take one of those online tests and read small passages. When I first saw him do that, I thought he had just finished the page. When I am interested in any subject that he is also interested in, I often go to him first and ask questions to get an idea of how I should approach it. He learns as much as he can about everything he gets into and retains it very well. Cooking, mountain biking, photography, video editing, and more. He masters subjects quickly and gains real knowledge when he invests time and effort. He now works for one of the major technology companies and is the vice president of a smaller division that he essentially runs. His sister might be even smarter. She was on track to become a neurosurgeon and was doing extremely well, but then developed a passion for art. I am not exaggerating. She could have made a living from it. When I first saw her artwork, I thought his parents had bought it from galleries. She gave that up to pursue something else. We have another mutual friend. More my friend's friend than mine. but I knew him. My buddy says this other mutual friend is by far the smartest person he knows, including himself and his sister, but I think he is being modest. Story 77, Walter Alvarez, who with his father proposed the asteroid impact theory explaining the extinction of the dinosaurs, has not received a Nobel Prize for it. He is 85 years old now and, in my humble opinion, deserves one. Story 78. I met Richard Feynman. When I say met, I mean that I was introduced to him and we spoke for about 15 seconds. I guess that qualifies. Story 79. I work at a large university and have met several Nobel Prize winners and MacArthur Fellowship recipients over the years, but once I attended a lecture by Stephen Hawking. Afterwards, I was able to meet him, although it was really just being in the same room with him, so I suppose that counts. Story 80. There was a guy in my first-year residence hall. We were both studying engineering, and he was probably the reason I passed first-year chemistry. He had some of the highest marks in every class. He ended up in the most difficult engineering discipline at the school, which was impressive, but in his final year he decided he did not want to be an engineer. He added one biology course to his engineering requirements, then took and aced the medical college admission test and entered medical school. I think he is now in family medicine or pediatrics. Story 81. A guy I worked with in retail had a degree in accounting. He realized very quickly that he hated that career, so he was an extremely intelligent man working at a retail store. Story 82. A student from school got a perfect score on the American College Testing Exam and had an intelligence quotient of 140. Story 83. Hello, original poster. It is difficult to say, but the most academically and professionally accomplished person I have met was Professor Sir Harry Kroto. He is best known for the discovery of a new form of carbon called fullerenes. That discovery won him a Nobel Prize and a subsequent knighthood. I met him when he was being awarded an honorary degree from my university. I graduated in chemistry on the same day. He attended a reception at the science faculty, and I spent a few minutes speaking with him. He had pale gray eyes that seemed to dance with wit and curiosity. It is very hard to describe. He was an accomplished artist. He designed a stamp for the United Kingdom Post Office and was a lifelong campaigner for scientific education. I will always remember meeting him. He seemed luminous with intelligence. Story 84. My mentor sees everything, analyzes it, and finds an answer. He encourages you to search for the answer yourself and is willing to guide you if you get lost. Story 85. Our chief medical officer is extremely intelligent. He is a polyglot and an opera singer, and he is very well-rounded. He speaks Mandarin, German, Spanish, and Italian. His curriculum vitae is long and impressive. He has been published multiple times in our specialty. He is one of the most down-to-earth and brilliant people I have ever met. Story 86. A woman who ran a tiny repair shop next to a bus station could fix phones, quote poetry, explain compound interest better than most bankers, and calm a shouting stranger all in one afternoon. Her brain simply glued patterns together quickly, whether it was circuitry, people, or money. She never needed to show off. She quietly made everything around her work better, which to me beats big test scores or fancy titles every time. Story 87. My stepfather had several degrees in chemistry and engineering and an extraordinarily high intelligence quotient. Once he and a friend were stealing something from the top of a large chemical storage dome at a job site. The friend lost his footing and fell. He called the police immediately, but he faced serious trouble and lost his job and professional credentials. When I knew him, he was an alcoholic. He remained mentally sharp, but he and my mother spent up to 18 hours a day drinking. He fell into an even worse alcoholic spiral soon after my mother died. I am not angry. He was not handling grief well and needed someone to be with. I do not know how long she survived or whether either of them is still alive, but I hope he found some peace, whether he deserved it or not. Story 88. I met Kim Peek at a public library. He was always with his father, his primary caretaker. His father was carrying the Oscar trophy that Barry Morrow had given to Kim. He even offered to let me hold it. His father encouraged me to tell Kim my birthday, so I did. Kim told me the day of the week I was born, the day of the week of my next birthday, how old I currently was, to the day, and when I would be eligible for Social Security. He calculated it instantly. Story 89. My oncologist is genuinely brilliant. When I met him the first time, we spoke for over 2 hours about my results because I needed a new oncologist. The previous one had been awful. He sat me down and explained everything in detail. I am familiar with healthcare, so I knew a bit already, but I did not know much about cancer, so much of it was new to me. He drew diagrams, explained concepts, asked many questions, and I asked many as well. I could tell he was not just smart, but someone who truly understands cancer as a whole. It was fascinating because very smart people often cannot explain things in plain language, but he did so with ease. As we talked, he learned that I am studying for a healthcare career and began mentoring me. He is always kind and empathetic. He has changed my life in many ways. I am grateful to receive care from a professional who genuinely cares. Story 90. I cannot decide between three people. My father, the two mentors I had as a maintenance technician, or my ex. My father is a brilliant, hardworking man who reads widely and studies history and social dynamics. He and I regularly discuss politics, social issues, technological developments, and their role in society and history. He always has something interesting to add or a recommendation for me to read. He has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but is probably one of the most organized people you would ever meet, with detailed ledgers and organized drawers going back decades. Both mentors were brilliant men who taught me everything I know about maintaining industrial conveyors, motors, gearboxes, and troubleshooting systems. One of them often took me to the gun range at his expense so we could shoot targets and talk. I have not seen him in years, since he became a fervent supporter of the Make America Great Again movement. My other mentor was down to earth, mellow, kind, and caring. He could tell you everything you would want to know about electrical and mechanical systems, and was always trying to lighten the mood around the shop with pranks and jokes. My ex was an amazing woman who was deeply interested in advanced mathematics. When she became interested in something, she learned everything there was to know about it and then explained it to me in a way that made it impossible not to admire her ability to learn and grow. Story 91. My business partner worked out that the vast majority of mortgage contracts are void under the law and has the banking industry dancing to his tune. This is despite having no formal qualifications in law. Story 92. My 5-year-old says this anytime I do something wrong. Story 93. My dad. Growing up with his brain, then going out into the world and seeing all the male brains offered to me. There's a reason I'm single. Story 94. My mate Dave has a library card. Whenever we play hide and seek, I can never find him. Story 95. My teaching assistant was 24 and nearing the end of his third Doctor of Philosophy degree. He already held a Doctor of Philosophy in Psychology, had studied physics for fun, and was completing another Doctor of Philosophy in Philosophy. I could not tell how much raw intelligence he had, but he had an unbelievable memory. If something was in a book he had read, he could point to the exact page, paragraph, and line where the quote appeared, and he could then cite 5 scientific papers as references on the topic. Story 96. When I was 12, I made a friend at my school whose favorite book was The Tin Drum by Gunter Grass. We had a creative writing assignment for class, and he wrote a satire of Tom Clancy's novel The Cardinal of the Kremlin Reset to take place at a 7-Eleven with an Oreo as Jack Ryan. He was a cool kid, but we were not friends long because one day he told me I was just too immature for him. I was in middle school, so he was right. Story 97. My partner has a Doctor of Philosophy degree and an unlimited amount of information that seems useless to me. I do not understand much of it, and he could have learned it elsewhere. Story 98. Nate Silver. I had a meal with him and several baseball prospectus colleagues. He radiated intelligence, which is the best way I can describe it. He was not the only truly smart person I have been around. I scored an 800 on the preliminary SAT/National Merit Scholarship qualifying test math section, and I attended the top junior high in New York City. Story 99. I know many extraordinarily smart people. The smartest, I would say, was a man who ranked second in his year in mathematics at the country's top university for the subject. He could work through entire problem sets while others reached only halfway. He grew bored, switched to law, and excelled there too. Unfortunately, he developed severe ulcerative colitis and could only work as a part-time tutor. It was a sad outcome. Another was a Ben Folds-level pianist. a left-handed guitarist who played Hendrix with ease, and who passed his mathematics advanced level at 15, later becoming a banker and trader. He was deeply modest, humorous, and handsome enough to attract almost everyone he met at college, like a younger, more boyish Timothy Dalton. Then there was a person I met on my college dating site who saw I was writing a novel and said, "Oh, I'm writing a novel too." My novel was poor, while she already had representation, having signed with an agent as a teenager. She now has a substantial bibliography. She may be the most extravagantly gifted prose stylist I have encountered and a true original as a person. We never dated but remained friendly acquaintances. Story 100. I went to high school with a guy who aced his American college testing exams while under the influence of lysergic acid diethylamide. He opened a pizza franchise right after we graduated. Story 101. Fully intelligent, including emotional intelligence, with the ability to work through engineering, mathematical, and technical problems and to handle people in a sensitive and respectful way. My superstar boss is awesome. Story 102. I knew a sales representative who worked for Apple. He could memorize a book after spending an hour or so with it by speed reading. Once he had time to process it, he could quote any page word for word. He said it did not really make him smarter. He felt he could not synthesize or transform the information into something new or revolutionary. He considered it a neat party trick and said it did not make him exceptional in other areas. Story 103. I have an ex who is as stupid as he is intelligent. I laughed out loud. That's very weird. He also has an incredible memory. Story 104. I meet so many intelligent people, but for me, it's probably Ernst Mayr. Story 105. My wife is brilliant, highly educated, creatively successful, wickedly funny, incredibly handy, and picks up almost any subject with ease when she has a reason to learn it. She is literally a genius. My runner-up is my best friend of almost 30 years. He is a high school dropout and severely dyslexic. On first impression, he often appears to be a goofball and a bit ditzy, but he is an absolute savant at teaching himself to become an expert at almost anything. He is a wizard mechanic. He knows the part numbers for everything in a car or motorcycle, regardless of make and year, and can talk for an hour about a maker's history before rebuilding an engine in a driveway with one screwdriver and one socket wrench and no jack. He has repaired engines blind over the phone by guiding someone step by step, because he can visualize the entire process in his head. He bought a 27-foot Coronado sailboat for $1,500 because it was run down and unseaworthy. He knew nothing about boats before buying it, then spent 3 months rebuilding it from the waterline up, replacing the sails, redoing the interior and exterior, rebuilding the engine, and restoring the instrumentation. He taught himself to sail solo and was doing multi-day sails in the Pacific less than 6 months after buying it. He upgraded it and sold it for about $15,000, used the proceeds to buy a 30-foot west sail for $10,000, repeated the process and sold that one for $25,000 to buy a 32-foot Yamaha. He knows enough about marine biology to deserve an honorary degree. He builds, repairs, and sets up full aquarium ecosystems as a hobby, including all the equipment and livestock. His main tank sits in a custom mid-century style console cabinet he built from scratch. He also built most of the furniture in his house. He taught himself aquarium science and woodworking. About 20 years ago, after losing his job, I suggested he try repairing commercial espresso equipment because I had been in the coffee industry my entire adult life and owned a successful cafe at the time. He taught himself, started a business, and within 2 years, was making just under 6 figures after taking most of the clients from other shops in town, which caused all but one of them to go out of business. He still does it now in Los Angeles, and while he is not rich, he makes a good living working 3 to 4 hours a day. This is not everything, but he is the only true Renaissance man I have met. I have known many educated, intelligent, capable people with broad knowledge, but he regularly becomes a high-level expert and is the person you call for almost anything he touches, always teaching himself despite a lifelong learning disability. He is a dyed-in-the-wool conspiracy theorist, not QAnon style, but more the kind who believes aliens built the pyramids, a Dale Gribble type. It drives me nuts sometimes, which is why he is runner-up. Story 106. My mathematics tutor from high school was an older man, and I remember working in his study. He had books on a wide range of subjects: economics, chemistry, physics, spy novels, and the Bible. I never asked him a question he couldn't answer convincingly. I was a very curious child who asked about everything. I still see him sometimes, and I always drop whatever I'm doing to say hello. Story 107. I have a friend with an intelligence quotient of 156. He only told me because I asked. He graduated high school 2 years early, received a full scholarship to university, and double majored in mathematics and computer engineering. He is humble and does not brag. I consider myself very smart, but he effortlessly outthinks me. My grandfather has numerous patents in his name. He dropped out of high school in 9th grade because of the Great Depression. I often wonder how different things would have been for our family if he had been able to go to college. Story 108. Honestly, my mom is probably the smartest person I know. She can juggle a million things, solve problems instantly, and somehow make it all look effortless. I still don't know how she does it. Story 109. My friend Graham has a photographic memory. He runs 3 companies and is doing well for himself, as far as I know. Story 110. I spend too much time at various universities, but I have never met anyone smarter than Andrew Tridgell, also known as Tridge. Story 111. A ruthless son of a bitch who was recruiting staff for a casino. 25 years ago, he humiliated me and others in ways that today, he could have been easily accused of bullying. He could figure out why you were blinking fast while doing more than 2,500 math operations per hour under physical and emotional pressure. Later, I learned that he was just doing his job. He was cold-blooded and treated psychology like a math puzzle. Story 112. Someone named Lena is a very intelligent physician. Story 113. She was probably one of my high school classmates. I went to a good school with an intensely competitive entrance exam, so everyone was quite smart, but Louise was exceptional. She was a year younger than everyone else and topped every subject each year. She was a talented musician. The only area she was not strong in, though far from the worst, was sports and physical education. Fortunately, she was an absolute sweetheart. I think she went to Oxford to study classics, Latin, and Greek, but we did not keep in touch, so I do not know what she did after that. Story 114. Graduate school advisor and professor in anthropology. Just brilliant. Sharp, piercing intellect. Example: I stopped into his office to discuss a dissertation topic in genetics and evolution, but he was on the computer writing statistical software for his own research. I offered to come back later, but he insisted on discussing my topic while continuing to write his software. We had a full, engaged conversation. He never stopped coding. In the middle of our conversation, another graduate student stuck his head in to ask the professor if he would be willing to write statistical software for his research. They discussed the research, the requirements of the software, and agreed on the final date and package, all while my professor kept working on his own software. When they were done and the other graduate student left, my professor picked up our conversation right where we had left off. I told him I would wait while he wrote down what he needed from the other student, and my professor said he did not need to write anything down. If it is important to him, he will remember it. I have no doubt he did. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.